So what is content-based instruction? The focus of a content-based instruction lesson is on the topic or subject matter. During the lesson, the students are focused on learning about something. This could be anything that interests them, from a serious science subject to their favorite pop star, or even a topical news story or film. They learn about this subject using the language they are trying to learn rather than their native language, as a tool for developing knowledge, so they develop their linguistics ability in their target language. This is thought to be a more natural way of developing language ability, and one that corresponds more to the way we originally learn our first language.
The theoretical ideas of CBI were developed and set into place towards the end of the 20th century, organized along the lines of other movements and programs appearing around the same time. Language across the curriculum emphasizes using creative and active means to deliver course content to culturally and linguistically diverse students. Rather than separating the study of language from everyday life and culture, the L2 is integrated into the content of academic learning. In the business world, because of globalization of companies, many programs, known as English for Specific Purposes, or ESP, appeared, using specially designed content-based instruction to teach English learners the vocabulary and speaking styles necessary for the target area, medicine, engineering, and others. Immersion instruction, used to teach people another language through academic content areas, is another content-based instructional approach, although mainly used as foreign language instruction, as it focuses on the language being learned and no native language support for CLD students. There are many scholars that have contributed to the evolution of content-based instruction. The most important ones will be briefly discussed here. The father of many of these movements, and certainly content-based instruction, is Stephen Krashen. He developed the ideas of authentic and meaningful input, that means content-based language, using the curriculum to teach, and a de-emphasis on grammar by making grammar implicit rather than the other way around. His theories of language development are succinctly stated in his 5 hypotheses of language acquisition: the acquisition learning hypothesis, the monitor hypothesis, the input hypothesis, the natural order hypothesis, and the effective filter hypothesis. Lev Vygotsky helped develop the zone of proximal development, that is, the gap between what a person already knows and the upper limit of what a person can learn from expert help. In order to reach this upper limit, the teacher can use content-rich processes, such as scaffolding and increased interaction, including clarification, checks, and repetition. Jim Cummins developed the differences between basic interpersonal communication skills, BICS, and cognitive academic language proficiency, CALP, and the movement from context-embedded learning to context-reduced learning. Henry Widdowson has written many articles on books concerning communication and functional skills, and has contributed to the development of ESP, the English for Specific Purposes. Donna Brenton, Margarita Ann Snow, and Marjorie Wesha published the foundational textbook on content-based instruction in 1989, which is still considered the Bible of the movement today. Finally, a leading figure today in CBI is Frederica Staller, who often appears at many conferences and seminars around the world.
Let's talk now about some of the features and strategies of content-based instruction. The communicative approach emerged in the 1980s as an evolution out of the prior language acquisition models, which held precise grammar rule knowledge as their primary emphasis. The communicative approach instead emphasizes real and authentic communication as well as negotiation of meaning. It has both language and content objectives. In other words, what field of knowledge or authentic context are you actually learning about? And within that, there are language objectives. This authentic literacy in context means using real and relevant content that the students will find more interesting and useful in their lives. For example, adult learners often want to learn practical content, such as the supermarket and the doctor's office, which are authentic and relevant content for those learners. It is also important to note that appropriate content will approach all 4 literacy domains, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Again, by being student-centered, the approach can use student interests and backgrounds by drawing from the roots the students have in their home countries, home cultures, what they've already learned, and what they're knowledgeable in. It harnesses these to create more relevant, appropriate, and interesting lessons. Finally, there are themes. Every module, which can last over a few days or a few weeks, uses a theme as a central orienting focus of the lessons. These themes sometimes are drawn from the fixed academic curricula of the schools, especially in K-12 environments. Another more general definition of theme is a central idea that focuses the language development activities. It could be sports, the doctor's office, the supermarket, to name a few. These features are the defining characteristics of the content-based instruction approach. Within these, you will have more specific strategies that can be used within a lesson and are the tools in your toolkit to affect these outcomes. One of the strategies is to pre-teach the vocabulary. In other words, before diving into the content, you will review the most important keywords that you're going to cover so the students can understand them, they can translate them, and they can negotiate the meaning. Building on background. Again, a lot of your students already have exposure to the content areas from their own home countries, cultures, or life experience. So what we're trying to do here is use their background and pull from that. So it will allow students to participate. It will allow them to feel that their prior knowledge is respected. It helps motivation, and it doesn't artificially regress the students to a lower level of instruction. It can take the level they're at and use it appropriately. Of course, there will be a lot of resources to enrich context. Instead of just having strong academic language, you're going to have a lot of other supplemental materials. These can be visual aids such as posters, movies, charts, realia, tactile objects. You have music and games to make students more engaged. And then, of course, the technology piece is emerging very strongly these days. There's always going to be a product of learning. This product of learning is going to be the capstone for the theme or module that the students can work toward, which uses and synthesizes all the different components of the language as well as content knowledge that they have learned over the preceding days or weeks. The product is often going to be some sort of project or presentation, such as a portfolio, that the student then can keep, deliver to others, and feel proud to have accomplished, and also can continue to be useful for them in the future. Classroom design is also an important part of this process because it understands that communication can occur in different venues, that students have different strengths and weaknesses as far as what they're comfortable with. So the classroom design can have different physical zones that emphasize those literacy domains. It can also have specific sections that facilitate individual study versus group learning. And more generally, the classroom design is trying to lower the affective filter so students feel comfortable, they feel safe, and they feel encouraged to practice and communicate their newfound language and content knowledge. Finally, collaborative learning is a very key component of this approach because, again, communication is the emphasis. With collaboration, students get to work with each other and practice those language domains. If you use heterogeneous groups, what this does is create groups with different language levels so they can help each other, they can learn from each other, and they can model for each other. And of course, there's small group versus large group configurations as well. In summary, this quote shows the very broad aim of content-based instruction. People do not learn languages and then use them, but learn languages by using them. All of these strategies have this as their aim. How can we help students to communicate and learn the language by using it? Another way to examine these features and strategies is to consider the perspectives of the different participants of the classroom. The educator may have one of several roles in these classroom environments. First may be as a co-teacher, along with the grade-level content-based teacher. Another possibility is the more conventional pull-out programs, where students needing additional language support will go to a dedicated classroom. Within that classroom, instruction still will be content-based, but with additional scaffolded supports. Finally, the instructor could be content as well as a discrete language instructor all at the same time, within the same grade-level classroom. From the student's perspective, there will be significant group work, which may look like one-on-one work with the instructor or assistant, small group work with heterogeneous groups of varying language abilities, or the entire class may meet together as appropriate. In this collaborative environment, students will produce products that reflect the content as well as the language learning objectives, that seek to engage the students with things that they find interesting and relevant based on their own unique backgrounds. The third component of the classroom is the environment itself. The space can be flexible and reconfigured as needed for the varying levels of group work. Significant visual aids may assist students in understanding, such as word walls, and various zones or centers around the classroom may be used to emphasize the different language literacy domains, as well as to help students with individualized study versus collaborative work.
So what are the benefits to content-based instruction, this relatively new innovation in language learning? One is that the learner is exposed to a considerable amount of language through stimulating content. Learners explore interesting content and are engaged in appropriate language-dependent activities. Learning language becomes automatic. Content-based instruction also supports contextualized learning. The learners are taught useful language that is embedded within relevant discourse context rather than as an isolated language fragment. Thus, the student makes much greater connection with the language and what they already know. And this enhances the practical usability for the learner. Complex information can be delivered through real-life context for the student to grasp well and leads to intrinsic motivation. The more you learn, the more you want to learn. In content-based instruction, information is reiterated by strategically delivering information at right time and situation, compelling the students to learn out of passion. There is a much greater flexibility and adaptability in the curriculum, and that can be employed to suit students' interests. Out-of-classroom content-based instruction for English as a second language, and more of the learning of the language is simply by the exposure of living, especially for the adult learner.
We also wanted to give just a few example themes to give a better sense of how content-based instruction works. Earth science can be an academic theme. Within that topic, you can set up lessons to learn weather vocabulary, for example. You can learn predictive language, future tense, and modals, such as it might, it's possible, or it will. Another example is doctor's visits. A lot of people have to deal with going to the doctor and they don't know the right vocabulary, they don't know the right etiquette of interaction or discourse style. So you get the vocab, you can do role playing in class, there's practical information, and also, for example, present tense descriptive. My leg hurts, it feels bad. Finally, holidays are socio-cultural themes that students can share to acquire cross-cultural awareness, learn practical etiquette, and understand expectations for those holidays. For example, Christmas and Halloween may not exist in the students' home countries. What is to be expected at those times? This theme can allow conversation practice, and then specific grammar practice can be present tense habitual, and students can also have storytelling about holidays in their home countries. Now we'll discuss our specific lesson plan which elaborates on this holiday theme.
Gary Chapman wrote a #1 New York Times bestseller called The 5 Love Languages. It describes 5 different ways that people relate to those they care about. Introducing the students to the concepts of Dr. Chapman's work shares literary psychology that is popular in the local culture. The students expand their thinking to innovative ways of describing their relationships and interactions with the native English speakers. Pairing this relationship topic, with Valentine's Day further connects the student to a popular American holiday. The 5 Love Languages is a lesson plan theme for Valentine's Day and would most appropriately be taught sometime during the week leading up to the holiday. This lesson plan practices expansive vocabulary, personal reflection, and shared communication. The students explore advanced vocabulary in 5 categories that deal with human relationships, daily interactions, and common social and cultural practices. The exercise exposes the students to many new words, but also requires them to apply these terms to the people and the relationships in which they are regularly involved. The students will connect these practices to their individual personalities and to their broader cultural norms. They will compare their own familiar customs to that of their new country. This requires learning basic vocabulary and then applying that to higher level thinking. Beyond analyzing these concepts, the students will practice communicating these ideas both verbally and in writing. By engaging in the lesson in this way, the students form a stronger connection to the topic and its relevance in their new surrounding. CBI incorporates material-rich resources. In this activity, the students access technology through informative websites and view video clips. They use index cards and chart making as a way to organize their understanding of the material. The students have an opportunity to create a personal and creative connection to the information by designing Valentine's Day cards for their friends and family members.